Have you ever wondered why the more you try to change, the more chaotic life becomes? Many people believe that if they are just more disciplined, try harder, do more, everything will be fine. But the more they force themselves, the more exhausted and confused they become, as if they are trying to arrange everything outside while chaos reigns within. From Carl Jung's perspective, the problem is not that you are weak or lacking willpower, but that you are not listening to what is happening inside you. When uncomfortable emotions, fears, or repeated reactions are not faced directly, they remain there and quietly lead you. You think you are choosing for yourself, but in reality, many decisions are made through old habits and old reflexes without your awareness. And so you call it circumstances, bad luck, fate, while inside you have long been accustomed to reacting in a certain way. Changing your life does not begin with becoming a different person, but with clearly understanding how you are living. When you recognize what influences you, it naturally loses some of its power. In this video, we will go through 10 practices inspired by Carl Jung, simple, clear, and grounded in everyday life, to help you reorganize your inner world from the roots. And if you feel that your life is out of rhythm without knowing why, stay until the end of the video, because what needs to change may not be outside, but in how you are facing yourself. Practice 1. Reclaim your attention. Stop letting the unconscious mind lead the way. There is something very few people realize, yet it determines the entire trajectory of your life. Where your attention goes, your life follows. When you lose attention, you no longer live from choice, but from reflex. You work, speak, and react as a series of automatic operations triggered by familiar emotions, old memories, and fears formed long ago. And when the same outcomes repeat, you call them circumstances, personality, fate, while in truth, the steering wheel left your hands long before. Carl Jung expressed this with a short, precise, and uncompromising sentence. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The unconscious is not the enemy, but when you cannot see it, it drives in your place. It chooses when you avoid, it decides when you get angry. It pushes you into familiar habits, even when you promised yourself you would be different. The danger is not that the unconscious exists, but that you do not know when it is leading you. Imagine attention like a mouse cursor on a computer screen. Wherever the cursor is, the action happens there. But many people let the cursor drift, clicking on any window that pops up. A notification, a thought, a fleeting emotion is enough to pull them away from what they were doing. The mind in that state is not bad. It is simply unmanaged. And when there is no one coordinating, old background programs take over all the resources. Modern psychology helps us understand this more clearly. The brain always seeks familiar paths because they save energy. When you are tired, tense, or unfocused, the brain automatically activates previously learned reflexes. You are not intentionally scrolling on your phone. You are simply trying to avoid an uncomfortable feeling that just appeared. You are not deliberately procrastinating, you are just avoiding a vague pressure. If you do not recognize that transition moment, you will believe that you have no choice. But choice only appears when consciousness is present. Therefore, reclaiming your attention is not about forcing focus or emptying the mind, but about recognizing the moment you have left the present. The moment you notice yourself being carried away, consciousness has already returned to the center. Jung did not say you must control the unconscious. He pointed out that when consciousness is present, the unconscious naturally recedes. No struggle or immediate fixing is needed, only presence. Life may not be easier yet, but it begins to have someone holding the wheel, and only from there can all other practices truly take root. If today you feel rushed, tense, or your mind keeps drifting elsewhere, pause for a few seconds. Place one hand on your chest or abdomen. Inhale slowly, exhale gently, then ask yourself, where is my attention right now? Do not answer with thoughts, just feel. Each time you do this, you gently bring consciousness back to the center, and little by little, you stop letting the unconscious mind lead your life. Practice 2. Train the body to stabilize the mind. After you begin reclaiming attention, many people quickly realize something important. Even when consciousness has returned, the mind is still easily shaken. Just a bit of fatigue, a bit of tension, or staying still for too long, and that clarity weakens again. This is not because you are doing something wrong, but because the mind cannot remain stable if the body is no longer a solid foundation. According to Jung, psychological life does not exist separately from the body, but is always closely tied to physical experience. When the body falls into prolonged tension, exhaustion, or stagnation, psychological energy becomes scattered, making it difficult for consciousness to maintain its central position. That is why many states we call anxiety, lack of focus, or reactivity do not begin with circumstances, but with the body already being out of rhythm, leaving the mind without support. I have a friend named Anna. For a period of time, she became easily stressed. A single short message was enough to make her overthink for hours. Anna thought the problem was psychological, until she realized that for months she had slept irregularly and barely moved. When Anna began walking more regularly and allowing her body to move, her mind softened naturally. Not because everything changed, but because the body became stable enough that the mind no longer had to brace itself. From a Jungian perspective, training the body is not merely biological, it is a psychological process. When the body learns to endure effort and stay with fatigue, the ego also learns to stand firm in the face of inner pressure. As a result, you no longer react hastily to avoid discomfort, but begin to develop the capacity to stay with difficult sensations consciously. There is a clear paradox in modern life. The less people move, the more they think. They lie still, but the mind is restless. Meanwhile, those who maintain regular movement often have clearer minds and more decisive judgment, not because they are more intelligent, but because psychological energy is no longer trapped in the head. It returns to the natural flow of body and mind, where emotion, thought, and action are no longer separated. Training the body, therefore, is not coercion or self-punishment. It is a concrete way to rebuild order from the foundation. When the body has rhythm, the mind has support. When the body is strong enough to stay with effort, the mind is steady enough not to be swept away by unconscious impulses. This is the crucial transition from merely noticing the inner world to creating a structure stable enough for consciousness to remain longer. According to Jung, the body is where the unconscious reveals itself most clearly. When you neglect the body, the mind loses its footing. And when the body is restored to its proper place, the mind truly has somewhere to stand. If this part resonates with you, leave a very short comment. I am learning to listen to my body, as a small sign to yourself that from now on, you begin to see the body not as something to endure, but as the foundation that allows the mind to stand firm. Practice 3. Do not run from circumstances. Change your inner position. As you become more aware and more sensitive to yourself, something often becomes very clear. Instability in work, relationships, or your living environment suddenly appears more sharply. The natural reflex is to change the setting to breathe more easily. But many people, after changing places, roles, or the people around them, realize that the heavy feeling still returns. According to Carl Jung, the issue is not the circumstances, but the inner position from which you are living. When that position does not change, new circumstances are merely another version of the old. Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. What irritates you or makes you want to escape is not only the external event, but the point of contact with something inside that has not yet become conscious." Circumstances thus become a mirror. If you turn your back on the mirror, the image disappears, but another mirror will appear elsewhere. When you stay long enough to observe, consciousness begins to move away from habitual reflex. Modern science explains this through the concept of stress appraisal. The same situation can be interpreted by the brain as a threat or a challenge, depending on the internal state. When the nervous system is in alert mode, the brain prioritizes rapid reaction, amplifies risk, and narrows choices. When the state is more stable, the same situation is processed more slowly, flexibly, and with less drama. This shows that your experience depends not only on circumstances, but on the body and mind position from which you interpret them. Imagine standing very close to a large painting. At that distance, you only see chaotic and unpleasant patches of color. Step back one step, and the composition begins to emerge. The painting does not change, only your position does. Changing your inner position works the same way. When you stand too close to reaction, everything feels tense. When you step back enough to observe, order begins to appear. You do not need to deny emotion or force calmness. You only need to change your distance from reflex. Many people confuse staying with resignation. In reality, staying is an active act. You do not let circumstances drag you, nor do you try to control them. You stand in the position of someone who sees reactions forming. From that position, the same email, meeting, or relationship creates a different experience, less defensiveness, less drama, and more options. Not because circumstances soften, but because the brain is no longer pushed into emergency mode. When the inner position changes, the power of circumstances diminishes. You do not need to win, nor do you need to flee. You can choose an appropriate action or choose not to act immediately. This is the crucial boundary between reflex and choice, and it is precisely this choice that marks the beginning of freedom. And perhaps, after all, what needs adjustment has never been what is happening outside, but where inside you choose to be present. When that inner position changes, situations that once felt suffocating gradually become more neutral. Not because life suddenly becomes gentle, but because you no longer enter it from the same old position where everything once easily controlled your perception and choices. Practice 4. Face the shadow. What you avoid is controlling you. From this point, the journey no longer revolves around adjusting circumstances, or changing inner position, but touches a deeper layer, the reactions you always want to deny. Even with greater awareness, there are moments when you snap quickly, feel hidden envy, or sabotage what you are building without knowing why. From Carl Jung's perspective, this is not regression, but a sign that the shadow is knocking. The shadow does not appear to make you worse. It appears when what has been avoided has grown strong enough to control you from behind. A channel viewer once commented that he always saw himself as rational, calm, and not bothered by emotions. Yet he often felt irritated by ambitious people who liked to show off and talk about achievements. At first, he believed this was because others were boastful. Only when he paused to observe his own reactions did he realize that ambition was the part he had never allowed himself to live. That energy was locked in the shadow, then returned to control him through irritation, sarcasm, and a sense of being stuck. The problem was not other people, but the unseen part of himself. The shadow is not a negative part that must be eliminated. It is a collection of emotions, impulses, and qualities that were pushed out of consciousness because they did not fit the image you wanted to maintain. You learned to suppress anger to be loved, hide ambition to be accepted, and conceal fear to appear strong. But what is rejected does not disappear. It retreats into darkness and begins operating from there, quietly influencing your reactions and choices. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." The more you avoid looking, the louder the shadow must speak. You can imagine the shadow as a skipped chapter in the book of your life. You keep reading, turning to the beautiful pages, believing you understand the story. But the skipped chapter does not vanish. It disrupts the narrative flow, makes later sections confusing, repeats characters, and returns the plot to the same knot. The shadow does not complicate the story because it is bad, but because a part of the truth has not yet been read. Jung believed that the shadow often reveals itself through projection. You are irritated by something in others because it touches a part of yourself that you have not accepted. The more you avoid it, the stronger the reaction. But when you stay long enough to look, power shifts. The shadow no longer drives you from darkness. It steps into the light of consciousness. And when it becomes conscious, suppressed energy no longer destroys. It becomes vitality for growth. If this part resonates with you, share in the comments a moment when you realized how your own shadow once spoke. Naming that experience is not about judging yourself, but the first step toward reclaiming control from what once quietly governed you. And when what was hidden has been seen, the next important step is not reacting differently, but knowing how to stop at the right moment, in the fragile pause between an emotion that has just arisen and an action about to unfold. Practice 5. Pause between emotion and action. Have you ever wondered why, even after recognizing the inner parts that quietly influence you, you still react in familiar ways? Often, it is not because you lack understanding, but because everything happens too quickly. Emotion arises, action follows immediately. At that speed, consciousness cannot return to the center in time. Therefore, the focus of this practice is not changing emotion, but slowing the moment immediately after emotion appears. From Jung's perspective, this is the state of effect, when emotional energy is strong enough to overwhelm consciousness, causing people to react out of habit rather than choice. Without a pause, you are not truly living from your center, but from a familiar unconscious impulse. Jung wrote a sentence that precisely captures this process. Emotion is the chief source of all becoming conscious. Emotion is the doorway to consciousness, but only if you do not immediately turn it into action. If you react too quickly, emotion closes the door to awareness. If there is a pause, even a brief one, emotion begins to reveal what it carries, and consciousness gains the chance to enter and see clearly, not to control, but to understand. In literature, Shakespeare's Hamlet offers a concise image of this moment. Hamlet is not lacking emotion. He is immersed in pain, anger, and inner conflict. But instead of acting immediately, he pauses, questions himself, and hesitates. To be, or not to be, is not merely an existential question, but a symbol of standing between impulse and choice. Through a Jungian lens, Hamlet shows that the pause between emotion and action is tense, yet it prevents humans from becoming slaves to unconscious reflex. In daily life, this process unfolds quietly. A glance makes you feel judged, and the body immediately closes. A remark touches an old insecurity, and you respond defensively. A fleeting sense of unsafety appears, and you rush to soothe it. In these moments, the problem is not emotion, but the absence of a pause, long enough for consciousness to return. When the pause disappears, action is no longer a choice, but merely the continuation of a familiar impulse. The practice here is subtle. In a familiar situation, notice the moment you have done enough, yet still feel compelled to do more. You do not need to change behavior immediately, only recognize the point where action no longer arises from clarity, but from the need to soothe or affirm. When you see that boundary, you do not need to stop emotion or suppress action. You simply end one beat earlier than the old habit. That pause may feel uncomfortable at first, like hovering between two shores. But that very suspension is where consciousness is born. Gradually, you will realize that you can stay with emotion without being controlled by it. And when action occurs, it carries a different quality, slower, clearer, with less regret, and more faithful to your true self. This is not self-control, but inner maturity, learning to stop at the right moment, precisely between emotion and action. Practice 6. Act before you feel ready. However, there is a very common misunderstanding in inner life. We believe we must feel ready before acting, that we must be less afraid, less confused, less conflicted for the step to be right. But if you observe closely, you will notice a familiar paradox. Readiness rarely appears before action. It usually comes only after you have crossed a certain boundary. And because of waiting for that state, many people become stuck in prolonged preparation, where life does not truly move, but merely circles in thought. From Jung's perspective, this is not a lack of determination, but a defense mechanism of the ego. The ego always prioritizes psychological safety over growth. It wants understanding first, control first, reassurance first. But the process of inner maturation, individuation, does not operate that way. It requires you to move forward before certainty arrives, while emotions are still mixed, before confidence has fully formed. If you only act when everything feels okay, you will remain within familiar loops. Jung wrote a short sentence that touches the core of this process. In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. When you stand before action without feeling ready, things inside may feel chaotic. Yet within that unsorted state, a new order is quietly forming. If you wait until everything is clear, the old order will continue to guide you. In everyday life, this appears simple. You know you need to begin something important, but keep postponing because you do not feel confident enough. You want to speak honestly, but wait until emotions feel better. You clearly sense that a habit needs to change, but wait until you feel more comfortable to begin. Time passes not because of laziness, but because you are waiting for an inner state that has never been created. Modern psychology shows that emotions do not always lead to action. They often follow. When you act differently, the brain records a new experience. As experience changes, emotion begins to shift. If you wait for emotion to change first, the loop will never break. But when you act despite hesitation, the nervous system receives a new signal. I can move forward without needing to be completely ready. That signal gradually weakens the power of fear. However, one misunderstanding must be clarified. Acting before readiness does not mean forcing recklessness or ignoring emotion. From a Jungian perspective, this is not an impulsive reaction, but a conscious action when emotion has not fully agreed. You do not deny fear, but you do not give it veto power. You acknowledge hesitation, but you do not place it in control. And if this part reflects what you are experiencing, share this video with someone who is also waiting to feel ready. Sometimes, a timely perspective is enough to create movement that has been delayed for a long time. Practice 7. Build value from within, not from external gaze. After you dare to act even when you do not feel ready, you begin entering a phase of building value from within, where support no longer rests on fleeting emotions or others' eyes, but gradually forms from how you choose and live each day. At this stage, a familiar temptation appears, seeking external validation to compensate for inner instability. Praise reassures you, indifference makes you doubt yourself. The axis of value quietly shifts outside, and inner life begins to depend on unstable signals. Jung expressed this difference with the statement, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." When you look outward to define yourself, you live in the dream of collective standards, where value rises and falls with expectations. When you turn inward, a state of awakening forms, and you know whether you are living truthfully without asking permission. Value is no longer bestowed, but emerges from consistency between what you believe and how you act. Imagine two compasses. The first takes signals from the weather. When the wind changes, direction changes. When eyes shift, you wobble. The second has a fixed internal axis. The wind may be strong, but the direction remains clear. Building inner value does not reject feedback. It turns feedback into data rather than judgment. You listen to adjust, not to be defined. Neuroscience supports this clearly. When the brain constantly seeks social validation, reward and punishment systems activate in a short peak, deep valley pattern. Quick excitement when praised, and prolonged anxiety when unseen. In contrast, when action is guided by inner values, networks related to stability and self-regulation strengthen. The result is a steadier state, less fluctuation, less defensiveness, and clearer decisions under evaluative pressure. In everyday life, the difference is concrete. You make a choice aligned with yourself, even without applause, and sleep well. You do something meaningful, even when no one witnesses it, and still feel whole. Conversely, living by external gaze leads to cycles of image maintenance, acting to be seen, fearing misinterpretation, and exhaustion from proving. Through a Jungian lens, this is when the persona occupies the center and the self is pushed aside, leaving inner life increasingly hollow despite outer stability. Building value from within is not denying the world, but placing things in the right order. First, the inner axis, then feedback. When this order is clear, you can listen without collapsing, adjust without betraying yourself, and move forward without constant permission. Tomorrow morning, try doing just one thing. Choose a small action you know aligns with you. Do it quietly, without waiting for praise or needing anyone to see it. Simply do it and feel the steadiness arising from within. From there, value is no longer something to seek, but something built through honest choices each day. Practice 8. Let go of perfectionism. The controlling ego is blocking you. At the moment, you no longer need external validation to confirm your worth. You may begin controlling everything to ensure you are not wrong. This shift is subtle. It is no longer the need for praise, but the need to avoid mistakes. No longer the desire for recognition, but the fear of losing the order you have just created. And here, perfectionism steps in like a gatekeeper, promising safety if everything is done right from the start. From Jung's perspective, perfectionism is not a sign of maturity, but a defensive strategy of the ego. The ego believes absolute control will prevent risk, shield wounds, and preserve a stable image. But psychological life does not operate in a frozen state. Growth happens through friction, experimentation, and necessary misalignment. When you force everything to be perfect, you unintentionally block the flow of transformation. Jung described the oscillating nature of the mind with great precision. The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. The pendulum does not rest at correctness. It constantly swings between meaning and absurdity. Perfectionism tries to hold it at one end, where everything must be right. Yet that very oscillation, incomplete attempts, decisions still being learned, is how the psyche self-regulates and evolves. Consider the story of Leonardo da Vinci. He is a symbol of genius, yet also famous for leaving many works unfinished. He continually revised, changed, returned, and then abandoned. To ordinary eyes, this may appear as incompleteness. But at a deeper level, he did not impose a rigid ideal of perfection onto the creative process. He allowed the work to live, to try, to err. Through a Jungian lens, this is the moment when the ego yields to the self, the creative source unbound by the need for control. In everyday life, perfectionism rarely appears openly. It hides behind familiar phrases: prepare more, wait for the right time, be more certain. You delay not because of laziness, but because of fear of error. You do not begin, not because of a lack of ability, but because you want to ensure nothing goes wrong. But the longer you wait, the more you are held back. The controlling ego does not make you safer. It deprives life of its natural rhythm. According to Jung, releasing the need for absolute control does not weaken you. It opens a deeper level of inner maturity. When you stop spending energy maintaining an image, preventing deviation, or forcing everything into the correct mold, life begins to move according to a more natural order. There, you do not need to force strength. You only need enough honesty to walk with what is unfolding. If this part resonates with what you are experiencing, press like on the video as a sign that you are allowing yourself to continue this journey. When you stop trying to make everything safe and smooth, you will gradually realize that the challenges ahead are not obstacles, but necessary experiences for you to grow in a steadier and more authentic way. Practice 9. Consciously step into discomfort to grow. If releasing the need for control makes life less convenient, that is not a sign of error, but an invitation to enter a deeper stage of maturity, where you learn to grow precisely within what is no longer comfortable as before. From Jung's perspective, humans do not develop by avoiding discomfort, but by expanding consciousness through facing what was once avoided. He wrote a famous and precise sentence for this process. "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." There is no upward growth without touching deeper and more uncomfortable layers. Discomfort is the root, where you must step into the unfamiliar in order to truly grow. In everyday life, discomfort does not appear dramatically. It arrives quietly, choosing silence instead of a habitual reaction, speaking a necessary truth even when it will not be easy to hear, staying with discomfort instead of immediately soothing it. Each time you feel slightly tense, slightly out of rhythm, slightly unlike your former self. But those moments show that you are leaving old inertia behind. Imagine maturity like changing the way you walk. At first, each step feels awkward, unnatural, and even more tiring. But if you return to the old gait simply because it is familiar, you will never adjust. Psychological discomfort is the same. It is the feeling of not yet fitting into a new structure forming. If you retreat at the first sign of discomfort, that structure collapses before it stabilizes. A very ordinary example is the story of someone accustomed to living by others' expectations. For them, convenience lies in always accommodating, always keeping things smooth. The cost is prolonged, quiet exhaustion. When that person begins setting boundaries, discomfort immediately appears: guilt, fear of judgment, and fear of disappointing others. Yet by staying with that feeling, a new axis forms inside, an axis of self-respect and clarity. If they return to old convenience, that growth never happens. According to Jung, the issue is not avoiding discomfort, but living unconsciously. When you consciously step into discomfort with awareness, you move from reaction to choice. Discomfort is no longer a sign that you are on the wrong path, but a signal that you are walking the edge of growth. What matters is distinguishing between growth-oriented discomfort and repetitive suffering. Discomfort helps you grow because it forces you to live differently. Repetitive suffering exhausts you because it keeps you in the same familiar loop. Maturity requires choosing conscious discomfort rather than being pulled into unconscious pain. At this stage, you do not need to seek grand challenges. Simply ask, what makes me slightly uncomfortable yet aligns with my values? That is where the door to growth is opening. And when you step through, you will realize that discomfort does not weaken you. It deepens you, steadies you, and brings you closer to yourself. Practice 10. Release the past through forgiveness. At this point, having dared to step into discomfort to grow, the final practice opens a deeper and more decisive requirement: releasing the past through forgiveness. No longer enduring or trying to overcome, but placing what has happened in its proper place within inner life. Because often, what exhausts you is not the present, but old stories still carried as if they were never closed. According to Carl Jung, people are not imprisoned by past events, but by how those events continue to live in the unconscious. An unforgiven memory does not remain quietly behind. It repeats through reactions, defenses, relationships, and choices colored the same way. Jung wrote, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life." At a deep level, forgiveness does not begin with others, but with accepting that what happened is part of your inner history. When that acceptance has not occurred, the past continues to hold the steering wheel. In the Bible, the image of Jesus on the cross is a clear symbol of this process. Betrayed, humiliated, and crucified, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." From a Jungian perspective, this is not merely a moral act, but a profound psychological transformation. Forgiveness here does not deny violence or justify wrongdoing, but ends the cycle of hatred at its source. If resentment is retained, it prolongs pain and transfers it into other relationships. In that moment, forgiveness does not first liberate the offender, but liberates the one carrying the pain. In daily life, non-forgiveness operates far more subtly. You may have left a relationship, a period, or a person who hurt you, but when that memory is touched, the body still tightens and emotion rises as before. This shows that the past is not truly behind you, it is still living within. Forgiveness, therefore, is not saying what happened was right, nor forgetting or returning. Forgiveness is the inner act of placing memory back into its proper time, so it no longer interferes with the present. It is important to understand, forgiveness is not reconciliation. You can forgive and still choose to leave. You can release resentment and still keep boundaries. From Jung's perspective, this is the shift from unconscious reaction to conscious choice. When you stop letting the past determine how you feel and live today, you are not denying what happened. You are refusing to let it continue controlling you. At this point, forgiveness becomes a quiet yet decisive act of maturity. It does not weaken you, it lightens you. When memory is placed correctly, psychological energy is released. From that space, you can move forward without being pulled backward, not through forgetting, but through understanding, acceptance, and a clear decision. The past has completed its role. Reaching the end of this journey, you may sense that fixing your life does not come from trying to be better, but from living more consciously. These 10 practices are not about controlling the outer world, but about returning to the inner center, where you stop being driven by old reflexes and begin choosing consciously. According to Jung, when the unconscious is gradually brought into the light, life naturally changes direction. You may not see everything resolved immediately, but you will notice that you are no longer carried away as before. You slow down before reacting, become clearer in perception, and begin distinguishing between old habits and the true call from within. Life may not be lighter, but it is truer, and that truth becomes the foundation for lasting change. If what this video shares resonates with the stage of life you are in, subscribe to the channel as a gentle commitment to yourself that you will continue the journey back to your true self. Thank you for staying until the end, and see you in the next videos.